Hello and welcome to Classic Book Reviews with David. Today I'll be talking about Silas Marner, or also known as Silas Marner, the Weaver of Raveloe. It's a story that was written, or published at least, in 1861 by George Eliot. And it's quite an interesting book in that it's about rural life, mainly rural working class life, in the early 19th century. And it's quite an unusual topic. It's rare that books talk about working class people back then. Most stories based in the early 19th century are based around the gentry, the upper class of their day, like Pride and Prejudice and other books. So it gives quite a fascinating insight into a rarely seen group of people in the early 19th century. So Silas Marner, the novel, it's relatively short compared to most of George Eliot's books. So it's a relatively quick read. It starts off with Silas Marner, the main character, who the book's named after. He's based in a place called Lantern Yard in the north of England. I'm not sure where Lantern Yard is, if it's a real place or fictional, probably fictional, I'm not sure. And he is engaged to be married, and he's got a best friend called William Dane. But one day, Silas Marner is accused of stealing funds from the congregation, his local congregation, his church congregation. It's a Calvinist church, and there's a trial. And how is he put on trial? Is it in front of a judge and jury? Well, no, it's not. It's a religious trial where there's something called the drawing of lots to determine his guilt or innocence. So it's a game of chance, really, if that's what you can call it. Now, I looked up, or tried to look up, information on the drawing of lots and to see how it worked, but I couldn't really find very much, especially in terms of how Calvinists did it back in the day, or if they did it. Was it just something that George Eliot had made up? It seems that some Calvinists did do the drawing of lots, and one way that it was done was to take two metals, one more expensive than the other, tiny pieces of metal, put them in clay, and then the party who was on trial would choose one of those balls of clay, and if the clay had the more expensive metal in, they were innocent. If it had the cheaper metal in, they were presumed guilty. And that's how it was done. And in Silas Marner, lots are drawn, and Silas is found guilty. Now, although the book doesn't say it explicitly, all the evidence seems to point towards his supposed best friend, William Dane, actually being the person who committed the crime. What happens next is, after Silas is found guilty, his fiancée splits with him, and then, just to rub it in, she marries William Dane. And Silas leaves the community that he's been with all his life, by the looks of things. He leaves them and ventures south to central England to a town called Raveloe, or a village called Raveloe. And here at first he's looked at with suspicion, and he doesn't do much to integrate himself into the village. Instead, he keeps himself to himself, weaving, that's his profession, and he starts to make quite good money. But he is viewed with suspicion by a lot of the locals. And over time he acquires more and more money and integrates himself somewhat in the local community. And then one day his money is stolen. I won't say who stole it, because I don't want to digress too much. And he is gutted. But later on in the story, he does receive something which he thinks is, in effect, an exchange for his money. I'll not say what that thing is, but he values it certainly more than he even valued the money, which he did value greatly. I'll not say much more about the plot, simply because I don't want to give too much away, especially how things turn out and the like. In terms of what I think about it, well, I don't think it's the best book in the world, to be honest. It's all right. It's interesting in that we look at something relatively new in terms of working class country life in the early 19th century. As I've said before, it's not something that's done particularly often in books. So it is quite interesting in that respect. And I never found myself getting particularly bored of it or anything like that. But at the same time, I never found myself getting particularly excited either. And on that basis, I will give Silas Marner 3 stars. You might enjoy it more than I did. You might enjoy it less than I did. But it's a famous book. It's been adapted numerous times for television and the like. So perhaps I'm missing something. So you might want to give it a read. And if you do, I've put some links below to places where you can find the book, including dyslexia-friendly and large print versions of the book if you need those or want to buy them for someone. And also I've put links to Twitter and Facebook, as I always do. And you can always subscribe if you want to. That's it.